Hi, welcome to the MCB Community Update. I'm your host, Eric Joseph, Executive Director of the Audible Local Ledger, part of the Massachusetts Audio Information Network, or MAIN, which provides reading services across the state of Massachusetts to people who are blind or print disabled. The MCB Community Update will interview Commissioner John Oliveira quarterly, and it will speak with other members of the MCB to find out more about the services and support that MCB offers the blind community. We welcome feedback and any suggested questions that you might want asked. Now, here is this month's MCB Community Update. Good morning. Our guest this month on MCB Community Update is the Director of DeafBlind Extended Supports with the acronym DBES, Lesli Baker Jordan. She runs one of the few MCB services that we've yet to learn about, and I'm really looking forward to finding out more regarding the unique and very challenging work that she does. So welcome, Lesli. How are you this morning?
Hi, thank you, Eric. It's nice to be here.
Great. Thank you for joining us on this chilly December morning.
Mhm.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself to start, your work history perhaps, and how you came to MCB. Is this something you've always been involved with, state agencies or assisting people who are disabled in some manner?
Well, I've always been interested in the disability community. I actually got my bachelor's degree in psychology, so I had actually intended on kind of going through the social work therapist route when I was in college. And then once I graduated, I ended up getting a position with a mental health agency providing job development supports to individuals with significant psychiatric illness. So that was really interesting, and I got to do a lot of wonderful work trying to help people get jobs and advocating for employment opportunities and working with employers to see that someone with a disability can work and can be productive. And then from there, that actually led me to a position with the career centers, which are now called Mass Hire, as a disability program navigator, and that exposed me to all types of disabilities, not just psychiatric. So I learned more about blindness. I'd always had an interest in the deaf community, just due to personal history with my family. So I had a little bit of background already for deaf culture. And but my work as a navigator in the career centers down in southeastern Mass was really enlightening. And then that was through a grant program, which ended up expiring. And right before it ended, I saw a position with the Mass Commission for the Blind, and ended up applying for that. And that's kind of how I got here, and I've just evolved from there. I originally came to this agency as a in this department in the Deafblind Extended Supports unit. At the time, it was called Deafblind Multi-Handicap, but with the way the culture is in society, we changed multi-handicap to extended supports to more encompass all the services we provide for such a variety of individuals. They're all different, unique abilities and skills. So. Um, and then from there, I became the supervisor for the Deafblind Extended Supports Unit, and now I am the director since 2019.
Oh, so when did you actually join MCB? Was that in?
In
Oh,
2008.
oh wow. So you're a veteran there.
Yeah.
You've been there quite a while, and you've probably seen a lot of stuff in those
Yeah.
years. Well,
Yes.
great, great. So let's figure out a little bit more and dig into the DBES itself, what it is. Maybe you can tell us, start with what's the eligibility, what's the level of combined vision and hearing loss that qualifies? Is it light? Is it heavy? Does it have to be, obviously, it has to be both in some degree. Maybe you can just outline a little bit about that particular service you oversee.
Yeah, definitely. So the generally for our department, to be eligible for services and case management from the DBES unit, you have to be deaf-blind and or legally blind and eligible for the Department of Developmental Services. So when I say deaf blind, that's essentially you have legally blind is the main criteria because that's a criteria for our agency as a whole. And then a person who's deaf blind would be considered somebody who has a who presents with a severe hearing impairment. And that would also entail that they need to use an adaptive communication method, such as American Sign Language, tactile American Sign Language, print on palm, signed English. And then that does also include individuals who have a progressive condition, such as Usher syndrome or something similar to that, so that they it would eventually be totally deaf and require that adaptive communication method.
And tactile sign language, for those who've seen The Miracle Worker, would that be signing in someone's palm the way that again, in this play, which many have seen, or the movie, Helen Keller was
Yep.
able to communicate and develop different instincts. So how does one identify that deaf blind consumer and build a plan around them, a way to help them? Is it through interviews? Is there a kind of standard template that usually gets applied and then you massage it to fit the person? How personalized are I guess, an individualized service plan, some kind of a plan that's put together?
Well, we have so the individuals, consumers who are assigned to our unit as deafblind, if they if they are also if we're identified as the lead agency, which usually doesn't only happens when they're turning 22 and leaving the school district. So if MCB is in their deafblind and we're determined the lead agency, we only do formal ISPs for those individuals who are getting intensive services. So that would mean like 24/7 residential placement. And that's like a formal ISP is just under the regulation that we follow, which is the same as the Department of Developmental Services, and where funding is involved, and we do formal ISPs for those individuals. The rest of our consumers, we do have support plans in place for them, just based on their individual needs. Everything is very person-centered. So one person may be needing X, Y, and Z, whereas another client who may have the exact same diagnosis, they're also unique and everybody's different. May not get the exact same services, but everybody gets a service plan. All of the counselors in my department create one for each person that's open on their caseload, and and then they just follow that. They can add to it. They can, change things all depending on what the individual needs at any given time.
Great, great. And those people who work with you are, do they have specific training for deaf-blind services? Do you do the training? And is there a school that basically trains people to do what you and your team do? Is there UMass? Is it, well, how does someone get trained to do something that seems like a very intense kind of service to offer?
Well, we have six counselors that cover all six MCB regions. So, we're a small department, but everybody has a very large and intensive caseload. Everybody's got a different skill set. They're all extremely qualified for the positions that they hold. Some are very fluent in ASL. Others may not be, but they may have the strengths because of a lot of our individuals are also eligible with DDS. It's really important that when somebody does come to work with it in our department, that they have that kind of a background. There is no formal training for services to be, to work with our consumers. Um, it's just having that willingness and ability to learn. Many of our counselors have pursued extensive ASL training since they've come to our department. It's not a requirement. It's extremely helpful for many of our deafblind individuals who that's the way they communicate. But we do have access to sign language interpreters that work with our counselors when they're communicating with individuals who are deaf. and maybe the counselor, that specific counselor, may not know American Sign Language fluently enough to do it without an interpreter. Even those that have ASL skills and can very fluently communicate with our deafblind consumers, if they're totally blind, a lot of times the consumer themselves will prefer to have a deaf interpreter work with them alongside our counselors. Um, it's a certified deaf interpreter is somebody who is a native speaker of sign language, or I should say signer. So that would be somebody who is deaf themselves and has always, that's the way they communicate. Because when it comes to sign language, it's different. The way things are when ASL is your first language, you and I think that would be kind of the same for a lot of languages. When you're brought up, that's the first language you know, you tend to do it differently than somebody who it's their second language. You have a different way of phrasing things, and a lot of times that's easier for our deaf clients to communicate with our hearing counselors. All of our counselors are hearing, so some of them request a certified deaf interpreter in addition to their counselor or in addition to an ASL interpreter. But it's all the individual's, specific needs or what they're requesting. We really base all of our services around the individual and what they need and what they want as far as our service delivery.
I would think that even being trained in ASL, which is not necessarily tactile ASL, that there's a learning curve just being able to know, well, how am I placing my fingers correctly on your hand, or is it always on a hand that things are spelled out? That's basically, I don't know anything about how
Not
that would be
always.
communicated.
Yeah, not always. There's a lot more in some people, and again, it's very person centered. Some of our clients aren't comfortable with a lot of physical touch, or they
Hmm,
have a specific way that they communicate with tactile. And that's just something that as we work with them, we get to know what their specific style is, what their specific individual communication method is. And not everybody's the same. And so sometimes, luckily we do have access to interpreters and that can help with that communication and make sure everything goes smoothly.
right. So even if you're trained, you still have further adaptations to make for each individual person that you're talking
Definitely.
to and their comfort level. I get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, if someone is in the program, how much attention would they expect to receive from a counselor? Would it be a check-in every month? Is it every week? Assuming it's not the intensive where they're in a group setting where it's profound. How much support is there? How often, when you have six handling a state with what I assume is a very large caseload, how much time can be devoted to the individual consumer?
It varies. I would say there are some of our consumers who certain times a year they require a lot more services, a lot more supports, a lot more interaction. But then, other time, it's all very much it's everything is so person centered, so case by case.
Right.
But it does fluctuate. There are some of our individuals who constantly need check-ins or need their counselor to come out and work with them. We have, I mean, they try their best because their caseloads are so large, but I know pretty much every one of these six counselors has about a handful that want to be seen and hands-on in-person interactions and case management weekly sometimes.
Mm.
So it can vary though. It really does vary. And I'm speaking mostly about our deafblind consumers, the individuals who are with us and they're legally blind and DDS but not deaf. DDS is the lead agency, so we're just kind of a peripheral service that's provided just related to their vision loss only, whereas their DDS service coordinator is the main counselor. and they contact us and bring us in if there's something related to maybe orientation and mobility or some rehab teaching or adaptive technology that the individual needs that DDS can't provide.
Oh, that's very clarifying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know how someone trained in blind services would be so widely scoped to be able to also handle a completely different disability that makes a lot of sense. So you said at one point though, depending on who's named the main agency, how do you go through the process of coordinating those services with somebody with DDS, or how do you decide who is yours and who do they take the lead on?
So usually that's determined at transition age. So in Massachusetts, transition age is 22. If the individual is staying in school till 22 and they transition at 22, through their school and through the parental involvement, guardian involvement, they if they're eligible for DDS, they would apply for DDS services. And then for every individual, every student team, be it their guardians, their parents, the school system,
Mhm.
and then also us as state agencies, both MCB and DDS, it would be determined whether or not they would be turning 22. And there's a form called a 688 referral that all the school systems refer when they're assigning a student to a state agency after transition age. So the 680 assignment is determined by the team. So somebody who's deafblind and also eligible for DDS, it's kind of a conversation between all the parties. What does the individual need? Which state agency is going to best serve those needs? And also, it does come down to which state agency has the funding to serve those needs. MCB does get allotted turning 22 money so that we are able to provide those intensive services to those that are deafblind that are going to need a residential placement when they turn 22, or they're going to need a day program placement when they turn 22. So if DDS is if it's determined that DDS is not the appropriate agency, even though they are DDS eligible, because we have such a wide variety of available services, and we have the funding, and we really are the experts when it comes to the blindness part, and being the agency that is the one that provides services to deafblind. Some students are sent to us. Their 688 is assigned to us so that we have that ability to give them the best services for what they need. And again, it's very person centered. It's very case by case, and it really depends on the individual and the family's need. That we've in the past, back when DDS was titled Department of Mental Retardation, a lot of families did not want their child stigmatized by that label. So they really pushed really hard to have MCB as the lead agency, because we are able to provide those supports. Maybe their child was going to need a 24/7 residential placement and we're going to need an intensive day program. We are able to do that. We have access to all the same programs and services when it comes to those types that DDS has. So that was very family driven, very team driven assignment of their 688. Now that DDS is Department of Developmental Services, it doesn't have as much of a stigma to it. So we're not getting a lot of pushback from parents when it comes to who's going to be the lead. And it really, which I think appropriately, it's looking more at what the person's needs are and what services they're going to need and who's really going to be able to serve them more appropriately, which I think is the best way to determine which agency they should go to, not based on the name of the agency. So I think
Yeah,
it's
certainly.
yeah.
No, it definitely sounds like when you're able to weigh what will become the best outcome for that particular person, and you have choices, options, which I know in many states there aren't those options necessarily that we have here in Massachusetts. That does sound like the most what's best for the consumer, what's best for that individual. And
Exactly.
I understand beyond and I keep coming back to tactile ASL, but what kind of assistive technology works for a deafblind consumer that we might know? Because things like the smart speaker are not obviously are not going to be a particularly good tool. The Meta glasses are not going to be a particularly good tool. What assistive technology exists that can cross over these two disabilities to be transformative in some way?
I mean, technology is huge when it comes to somebody who is deafblind, especially if they're totally blind, and they're not able to see text, they're not able to see pictures or to interact the way we're interacting on a computer using Zoom. So technology is really big, and we really do advocate for students, especially when they're in school. If the prognosis is that they are eventually going to lose all of their vision, that we try to advocate with the TVIs, with the school districts to give them as much Braille exposure as possible,
Hmm. Yeah.
because Braille is I mean, out of all of our deafblind consumers, the ones that are most successful are those that know Braille, because they're able to access the computer technology so much easier. They're able to access their phone technology with like Braille notes, with Braille displays. So it just makes so many more opportunities for them if they also know Braille. Not everybody does, so and not everybody's able to learn Braille, so it can be a little challenging. There are other options depending on the individual, how much vision they have, how much hearing they have,
Hmm.
because it can vary. It's all across the spectrum of levels, but the communication part is the main issue, I would say, the main challenge that I think our consumers face when they are totally blind and totally deaf. But Braille has been a really significant benefit to those individuals.
Yeah, I would imagine that getting the earlier the better, like learning any language, learning any skill or technique,
Right.
the younger that can be, the earlier on that can be identified, the more helpful it will be, and especially if you have some hurdles to overcome to be able to communicate and get
Right.
through things. Well, you've told us the communication methods that are used in the program. Um, is there anything else this in this world that would be helpful that you don't have at this point? Would it be funding, more bodies? Or do you feel like you're set up to handle the challenges that are placed? Because you do have a set of very unique challenges that are in front of you that many of the other directors, we all have challenges, and I don't mean to judge one challenge over another, but is there any innovation coming along besides being able to get Braille earlier that might be able to push along the development of someone who is deafblind?
I would say the biggest challenge that we find, aside from the Braille and just accessible technology, is that interpreters. It's really difficult because this is a hearing world. The occurrence of deaf blindness is very small. Not many people out in general public know American Sign Language or are familiar with how to tactily sign. Tactile sign language is not something you can just take a class for. It's something that if you already know ASL, then as you use it tactily with somebody else who uses tactile, it's not something that you can actually go and take a course to learn. It's something
Mhm.
that you have to just do and practice with somebody else who uses tactile ASL. It's been really difficult since COVID to find tactile interpreters or even certified deaf interpreters who can communicate in person with our deafblind individuals, because a lot of those who are totally blind cannot do virtual ASL virtual conversations because they can't see this monitor, they can't see somebody on the screen interpreting. So those individuals need an interpreter in person. Since COVID, it's been really difficult to find people who will interpret in person. They're very few and far between, and especially our certified deaf interpreters. There just aren't that many.
Mm.
So that's been the biggest challenge is trying to get that communication access in person to our deafblind consumers. I know that uh, a lot of them come to us asking for assistance because hospitals and medical professionals, a lot of times hospitals rely on virtual interpreting because they need something quick and immediate, and they don't have time to, if it's an emergency situation, they can't get a physical interpreter. But for somebody who's deaf, blind, that's not accessible communication. They can't see the monitor. So it's been very challenging. And luckily, our sister agency, Mass Commission for the Deaf of Heart and Hard of Hearing, does a lot of advocacy with the medical and healthcare industry and hospitals all around Boston and Massachusetts to try to educate them on the importance of in-person ASL interpreters, why it's necessary, how to get them, how to request them. Unfortunately, it's very costly. So a lot of hospitals have a lot of issues with that. But some of the great things that are coming about is that technology is advancing because of this need. There's a company called Tatum Robotics who has created a robotic hand that signs. So it's
Wow.
fascinating. I highly recommend you look it up. The founder, Samantha Johnson, is just amazing, and she's worked with a lot of our consumers, our deafblind consumers, in developing this robotic hand. Many of them love it. They think it's just the best thing because they can plug it into anything because it's like a little hand computer, and it can they can actually do tactile signs. So somebody who doesn't know Braille, it can basically take written word. I'm not sure yet if it does auditory, but I know with like you could type in something and then the hand will sign it. And so the person who's deaf can have their hand in the robot and then be able to tell what the robot's signing based on what the robot's interpreting from the written word. So it's really wonderful. Yeah, I mean amazing things. So we're excited about that. So that's coming along, but we're hopefully more and more and more things like that will be created and developed so that somebody who doesn't know Braille, can then still get that communication, be able to communicate that way and not have to have a person physically by their side. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Communication conquers loneliness often, being able to just be able to communicate such a simple thing. And with us becoming more and more visual learners, there's some hurdles there as well. But the development of robotics, AI, just getting smarter technology wise, I'm sure will prove beneficial in especially in these critical cases that are much more complicated than just an average well, I don't see so well, but I can still see okay and get around, the moderate people that are out there as who aren't quite consumers yet. Um, Thank you for the information. We like to end our interviews with a little bit of personal insight about our MCB professionals. So, on a totally different note, pun intended, what was your first concert and which band or artist is your favorite artist?
So I have watched a few of your previous podcasts of this. So I was anticipating this question, and I've been stressing over it
Oh
actually because
no.
I have a very very eclectic musical taste. So it would be impossible for me to name a favorite. Um, because my musical genres interests expand over pretty much everything. So I might be able to give you 20 favorites. I
Well,
don't
how about
know.
your first concert? Let's
Yeah,
not go the
right.
individual groups are probably too much.
Yeah.
You might say Aaron Copland or you might say U2. I don't know. But
It could be anything. It's not, I will say, just from watching past ones, it is not Billy Joel. He's
okay.
so
Or heavy
not
metal?
that he's I mean I love Billy Joel. He's fantastic, but I just want to put that out there. But he's wonderful.
Okay.
But no, my first concert, I was 13 years old. So let's make sure we're understanding the genre here, was the Cult. So I don't know
The
if you've ever
Cult?
heard the
Is that what you?
Cult.
Oh, sure.
Yes, that
She
was one of
wears
my first.
what's their big song?
Sanctuary. She wears
Sanctuary. Yep.
sanctuary. Yeah.
Okay.
That
Yep.
was that was when I was 13, that was my favorite band. So
A
it
head
was
banging band. I
yeah.
bet the head was doing this a lot at
Oh
that
yeah, yeah.
concert. Oh,
I had a I
great,
had a had
great.
a sore neck.
Well, thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much for all the insight you provided. I literally knew almost nothing about this, and now I feel like I have a much better understanding, and I'm sure our listeners do too. So thank you for filling us in. It's much appreciated. Really do
Absolutely.
appreciate
No.
that. And for the listeners, the MCB Community Update now goes on hiatus until the spring when we will speak with the commissioner on the various updates that have taken place in 2026. And all 22 of our MCB Community Update podcasts are available at the audiblelocalledger.org website, which is fully disability compliant under the Listen tab. My name's Eric Joseph. We here at the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts, wish all of our listeners and supporters the very happiest of holidays. Bye for now.